Hello, Graham Currie here from Monash University. Thanks very much for inviting me to speak at your event. I'd very much like to be there, but unfortunately we have a national conference where I'm speaking at the same time. So I've been asked to talk about buses, improving buses in Melbourne from a local government perspective. I'm going to talk about the need for buses and also what local government in particular can do about this. Well, buses are very important to the city because more than 2/3 of all residents in Melbourne have a bus as their local public transport, not a train or a tram. It's because they cover such a larger part of the city. This is a problem for Melbourne because the service levels are pretty low. When we measured them a few years ago, 2006, quite a long time ago, it was about 40-minute headways. Buses come every 40 minutes in the peak and 50 minutes off peak. It's improved since then to about half an hour, but the service spans and the level of service is still very low. There were gaps when we measured this in Melbourne. That's the network on weekdays, and that's the weekend services. It's improved since then, but it's still a problem for Melbourne. There's also a great deal of inequity in the distribution of transport available for people in Melbourne. We did this work a few years ago on the population of Melbourne, and it showed that the amount of service here in the city, given the level of population, about 70% of the population have only 20% of the service in Melbourne, and 30% of the population have 70 or 80%. Very unequal, and the gap is really on the fringe of the city. This diagram shows the areas of Melbourne with low socioeconomic groups who have a need for transport alternatives, and that's where the gap is, and that's where buses are such an important solution. When you ask passengers what they want for improved buses, it's very clear. They want reliability, more coverage at nights and weekends of services, and improved frequency. And frequency is a really big issue because we've got very low frequency buses in Melbourne. This is a study we did of bus services in Australia, and as you can see, the amount of ridership we get on this access completely varies according to the amount of service provided. And when you look here, you'll see a lot of Melbourne bus routes are at the lower end here. We've got very low frequency service, even by Australian standards, certainly by international standards. And here's Melbourne, leading the world at the bottom of the performance of cities in terms of their bus fleets. We certainly aren't a good performer in buses. We need to get better than this. Our populations need the services. It gives people an alternative to the car. And in fact, Australia has a very big problem in this area, and Melbourne in particular. This is a graphic from the Infrastructure Australia report recently published about Melbourne. And in particular, it measures how many people in the city don't have access to good quality public transport in both the inner areas, the middle suburbs, and the outer suburbs. And here we have 62% of all people in outer Melbourne have no access to public transport. That's 1.4 million people. It's a huge amount of the population of Melbourne entirely. And when you compare this to other cities in Australia, we've got the biggest problem. So it's a national problem, this. It's not just an issue for Melbourne. And we need to do something about this because otherwise people will be driving everywhere. Social groups that have problems, those problems are going to get worse as we grow. And you'd know all about this, being in local government. You know, our growth rates are really putting our infrastructure under stress. We need to find alternatives. Now, we have had some improvements in services. This diagram shows over time, and including most recently, what's been happening, the amount of investment in services. This is particularly the amount of supply of bus services, trains and trams in Melbourne each year from the annual reports. And it's the amount of service, kilometres operated. And we see blue here, buses have been improving. There was a bit of a decline in 2011, but we've been having more and more service every year. It's flattened off recently, but importantly, our population's been growing. It's been booming. And when you look at the amount of service per head of population, since about 2012, 11, 12, we've been going backwards. We haven't been dealing with the growth at all. We haven't been putting the amount of service just to even cope with growth. So it's a very big problem, but and as the city grows, you know, we're going to be the size of London by 2031, and you know, London has 8,000 odd buses, and Melbourne's only got about 2,000. We need a lot more to be a city of that size to realistically cope with it. But what can local government do? Well, I've worked with local government for 30 odd years, and there's only three real things local government can do about this. You can either facilitate change by acting as an agent of change, using what you can do to persuade people to do things better, and campaign really with state government and federal government bodies to do something about this. You can add value in the services that you provide that might help with this, or you can directly get involved here. And you shouldn't forget, that Brisbane City Council, the Australian Capital Territory, are local government areas, and they both run buses. In fact, the bus fleet in Brisbane is very, very large, and they run a large busway. So, it is possible, but you haven't got the funding base. And there's the truth. You need to find ways of moving forward through facilitation and value adding. What could you do about this? Well, with facilitation, there's a lot you can do. You can take partnerships, clubbing together with nearby councils and acting as a regional area. And we've seen bits of this with the MTF, with the Eastern Transport Coalition. The idea of leveraging your work together to, pressure for better improvements in this area, working with industry. You can have forums such as the event you're doing now. You can promote sustainable transport by debating and publicising these issues. You can advocate for particular projects. I know a lot of you are talking to the inquiry on the North East Link. Or you can act as a local agent for change by holding advisory groups, asking the bus company to come in and talk to local people sort of once every 3 months or so. It frees things up and you all learn a bit about what's happening. And I think it helps you train your staff about the types of things that you can do. Also, you can add a lot of value by having your own transport plans, using those to integrate with what the state does. You can build the skill base of your employees and your councillors so that they understand the issues and can talk to the local government and also with local communities. And you can encourage activities of council that would help with buses, reducing parking requirements in developments, travel behaviour change programs to encourage better bus usage. And a great example is you all run libraries and you have great access to the public, better access than the state government really. And you can promote timetables and improved information, working with the operators, and then undertake your functions more sustainably. What do you do now to encourage staff travel by buses? So that's my opinion here. I think local government has an important role here. You're closer to the needs. I wish you every success with your event because I think really Melbourne needs much better bus services. Thank you very much.